Paul, when you do your video conferences, do you not have a picture you put up?
Yep.
Could you correct
Mhm.
He's lost yourself. He's supposed to be presenting.
I said, your business address.
Okay. Have you ever had any other trouble connecting to a display like this? Yeah.
Try some.
That's
Try some. Yeah.
Trouble with it before.
Happy holidays.
That Titanic is earlier.
No, we're not plugged into the projector.
But I actually went back.
Where's my present?
Don't do double work.
Well, maybe two, like, well, maybe two.
Okay. Let's see. Is it up to the mayor?
Yeah, I'm gonna check that right now.
Matt's
No.
still checking that.
What are you doing? Oh, there you go. What do you want? Go to displays.
Actually, it's really only.
Yeah, but you could just go to go.
Yeah.
Alright, go to arrangement and press smear. Let's try this.
We're gonna cycle through one more time.
Like what?
Third.
So you can make that.
And I moved here from there.
Oh,
you were there last year. I moved this from here. And then I moved here from there.
I hate driving across.
Oh, tell me about it. It takes
On I-10.
My first day on the road was just to get out of Texas. I used to stay in New Mexico. Barely. So you went to Texas? Yeah, well, that was a full day. It was 570 miles.
So it's still not showing anything?
Pandemic.
We got a group of people at.
They have it until 9.
Looks like they're not Austin.
It's
in the middle of the night.
Let me ask one second.
Just block the steering wheel.
Chris said that
Yeah,
you
just block
can
the
come
steering
from Fairfield right
So
now.
there's no bends in that road.
No.
I was going.
We're running out of time, so we're gonna get started.
Okay. They just said that they're gonna get started. They're supposed to start
That's
at
a 900 mile day. I'll go after you.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
The tech guy just got here. Hello.
I said that they're supposed to start at 7, so they're just gonna try and start right here.
James, I got my iron button.
Sorry about that. Okay, let me ask. One of the AV technicians that works for the school offered to come by and take a look at it. He's coming from Fairfield. Yeah, he would like you to come by if you can.
All right, who's gonna go ahead and present?
Yeah, I've been trying.
All right, so we're projecting on the on the Wi-Fi channel, or excuse me, on the YouTube channel. Unfortunately, this and the TV are not working, so everybody's got to look at this screen. And you've got your game management guidelines, hopefully, so at least you can see them. What page are you doing?
2, 3, and then I think 16 through 19.
Okay. So we can all get closer so you can see it if you want to project it. Apologize.
So I'm gonna give you guys my perspective on like the pages that I was assigned. Nothing in there from, at least on my pages, is new from years in the past. So for the most part, it's gonna be just my own perspective on it. So page 2 talks about like principles of the game. So like we're arbiters of the game, trying to like involve and facilitate like the passions of the sport, as well as to grow it and share our own values. Essentially what we're doing is like effective communication and communication management, which is essentially all of refereeing, but it is touched upon here, and doing it effectively. From when we arrive at pitch to like when we leave, we're accountable for our actions. So that's essentially our demeanor. So we act professionally and whatnot. And then one of the big things is rapport. So trying to develop a good well-being standard with players, coaches, and the fans. This generates positive like behaviors and positive attitudes, and in a kind of environment where contact sports are kind of getting a little more controversial for parents, that it'll kind of prop up rugby in that way. Well, and the other thing is, after the game, before or when we develop our relationships, we try to build them before the game, during the dead ball part of the game, and then after the game. And the important part there is giving yourself the time and the space to think about the game and talk to the players and the coaches. Especially with coaches after the game, give yourself and them the time to cool down. I had an incident last year where Coach and I spoke immediately after the game, and I don't think our relationship has recovered in that sense. Sorry, excuse me. I know for me, whenever the next couple of times I've seen him, I've kind of kept my distance from him because it made a very negative impression, the way he and I interacted and he talked to me. So give yourself that extra bit of time to cool down and give them the time to cool down, especially games when games are close and tight and one team specifically loses and that coach wants to talk to you. Page 3.
We can't read that.
I know, but I think it's for the people on in the ethos of the internet. Through a series of tubes, right? Through a series of tubes. Abuse, and this talks about abuse, and specifically abuse on pitch from the sidelines. Apparently, abuse doesn't matter if it doesn't happen if it's in a stadium. Stadiums where fans are distinctly separated from the pitch, so like Steuben Field in Stanford, or like the finals of the down at Santa Clara last year, those don't count. So when fans yell at you from there, we're apparently supposed to take that. But when they're like at GG and they're like on the sidelines behind like a rope, that's not considered a stadium. And that there, abuse does and can happen. And sometimes when you're in the middle, it's hard to hear it, because I know I'm so focused on what's happening in front of me and what's happening around me that I don't really hear the sidelines. So a lot of the times ARs hear it. But the biggest thing to take away is to minimize the propagation of it. So whenever you have it, and it doesn't matter if it's at a lower end game, high school, or below U10s, U15s, or at high games, that we need to step it out, that we should make a big deal of it when it crosses your own personal line, because it doesn't really say in here, it doesn't give you a definitive criteria of what abuse is. So we're all going to have our own threshold of what we consider acceptable complaints from coaches, players, fans, and what is not, and what is beyond that kind of thin red line.
There was a quote by a baseball umpire one time that ejected Roger Clemens, and he basically said that Roger had dropped an F-bomb on him, and it wasn't the F-bomb, it was the U that followed it, because that made it personal. I tend to feel like personal attacks are crossing lines versus, hey, ref, that terrible call, that's one thing. Hey, ref, you're an idiot, that's another.
Yeah.
And I'm not the president.
But I can strive to. Be like him. Yeah, so to have a zero tolerance policy, so whenever you hear it, make a big deal of it, stop the game, address it, and then move on. One of the things we don't want to get into is repeats, right? So if it happens and it happens again, just get them out of the way, get them out of the stadium, get them out of the playing area or immediate area, and then continue on.
But what's your favorite method for addressing the problem? How do you go about doing it?
Because it depends on who it is. Because it
That leads into my comment.
Go ahead.
You are going through the captain on all this stuff, right?
So usually the guideline says not to. If it's a coach, directly address the coach. And if that doesn't work, then you go through the captain. That's what the guideline says.
Which guidelines?
Management
Kick guidelines?
Yeah.
The one that confront Jack Clark
Did-
guidelines?
did
You're
that
fucking
change?
stupid.
I'm just saying that's what the guideline says.
Yeah.
So
If it has anything to do with the player or the coach, it's the captain. Anybody outside of that, you do with other people. But yeah, you try not to go direct because that's the problem. That becomes confrontation.
right. Then don't listen to the guideline, and it's a guideline. So feel
Guiding you down the
free
right path. We've learned.
to throw it
That's how
out.
Pirates of the European.
Yeah.
It's more of a guideline there.
Yeah, or a set of guidelines.
We're not
So
really pirates.
Well, it says to call the head coach over and have the head coach talk to an identified player.
right.
So you're not really addressing an identified player, you're going through a coach to do it.
So essentially, then go through the captain because the captain can address the player. Going on to the next section, which is my next section, which is page 16. It talks about advantage. Let's see.
While we're doing this, are we requiring both teams to be on the same side of the pitch?
Yes.
Yes.
Unless they're physical.
Well, I mean,
Barrier.
I game where they weren't, and it struck me as odd.
Shame.
No, as long as there's ropes.
No, you got the fans on one side, the
Because you're
teams on
supposed
the
to have
other.
a technical zone.
In technical zone.
I mean, in places like Cal, it's hard to do that, right?
This is Jack.
Well, I'll just tell you right now, Reno does them on opposite sides.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, are we
No,
still
I
supposed to have
don't
like a
think-
security guy there?
For Cal?
Pardon?
For what? For all matches?
I know.
All matches, there were supposed, the
There's supposed to
teams
be
were
a
supposed to
technical zone.
supply, one person that would take care of that stuff and make sure the field was set up and things like that. There was a field official of some sort.
There's
Yeah, you
supposed to
need
be
to
a
have-
That would be
field
handled through the Northern California Rugby Society. Or NCRRS.
Are we
No,
supposed to
that's
make
we're
sure
the
there's a technical zone?
NCRRS, Rugby Referee Society. Different.
NCR first.
As NCRFU or whatever.
NCR first.
Thank you.
But the question is, are we supposed to ensure there is a technical zone, and if there is not, abandon the match?
I would not. I would.
Not asking what you would do,
Yeah.
I'm asking what the published guidance has been.
USA Rugby and the guidelines say that there needs to be protocols in place. There needs to be sideline protocols in place. So you need to work with the teams prior to the game starting to ensure that those things are set up. There's some places that physically can't do it. Cal is one of those places. But it's hard to argue that Cal doesn't have a well set up system, even though that they can't have side places on both sides. So you've got to work within the confines of the limited space that you have. In a perfect world, yeah, everybody'd be on one side. There'd be 10-meter zones. There'd be a meter past the touch line where the ARs can run. There'd be a 10-by-10 grid on the 10-meter lines. There'd be technical subs and all of those. But you got to work within the structure that the confines of the teams. So get there plenty of time. Provide them with, if they don't have a copy of it, provide them with a copy of what the sideline protocol should be. All of the teams should have them at this point. It's not new. This is the second year that they're having it. And work with the teams to make sure that they're compliant, at least within something that creates the game. Don't abandon the match just because, of something. Figure it out.
Yeah, since you're going to be there early, work with the home side to create that environment, and if not, try to address it after the game so it doesn't happen repeatedly to the next referee that comes. If you see it, address it, but I don't think you need to abandon a match because of a technical zone.
Did Northern California create a sideline protocol?
There's a national protocol. I don't know that there's a specific one for Northern California. There is definitely a technical zone guideline.
It's
Yeah.
it's not limited to.
Who's our current representative to the NCRFU?
Me.
And has this been discussed at the NCRFU?
Yes. The problem is that
I know that voice.
you have 7. We provide services to 7 different competitions. It's not just NCRFU.
I understand.
So the colleges all have really the hardest to become compliant has really been NCRFU. The colleges are all in place. The high schools are in place because of NorCal. So really the only issues you might have are the Division II, not even so much that, but the Division III sides for NCRFU. And there's policies in place for them. They're all, NCRVU is well aware of the guidelines and are working with their teams to ensure that they've done it. If you don't have sidelines, take pictures of it, send it to me, we'll distribute it to NCRVU and fix it. We have very good relations with NCRVU, with the NCRVU board, and they're working with us to try to get, everything in place. And in fact, NCRVU this year is going to be requiring all the Division I and Division II teams the home teams are going to be providing video for the matches, so that we can do more referee coaching through Advantage.
Is there any situation on a field that you would recommend abandoning, like not having the the goalposts padded or?
It's unsafe.
If it's unsafe, it's unsafe.
Yeah. Like having concrete this far away from the touchline. Yeah.
That's bad, okay?
Or what was it? Who is it? There was someone that always talked about a pitch in Hawaii where you had like volcanic rock on the field, and they were like, I would not referee on that.
Rock.
You know, like physically sharp.
Don't get tackled.
Yeah. All right. So advantage. There's two forms of effective advantage and non-effective advantage. When we stop play and when we allow play to go forward, when you determine that there is no advantage. Typically, we don't play advantage for foul play and then tackle penalties. Very few scenarios you'll have an advantage that you can actually gain on a tackle penalty. Of course, if you're within 22 or then attacking, you're going to want to play an advantage on a tackle penalty. But typically, because tackle penalties and ruck penalties slow the ball down and slow the game down, it's very hard to gain an actual advantage off of something that slows the ball down, because that's an advantage for the defense to get back in line or to get players back and rotate it over. So then safety concerns, so dangerous tackles, scrums where players pop up off their feet, tackles when players pop up off their feet. You don't really want to play an advantage on a dangerous cardable offense typically, unless there is a scoring opportunity and a definitive scoring opportunity, mostly because it sets a bad standard, right? That we're going to we'll allow something that's dangerous to kind of go, even though we are going to address it. It doesn't have that immediate impact if you play an advantage on a dangerous incident. And then usually within the 22, with a defense having the ball, usually don't really want to. There are certain teams that will not like that they want to attack from even with inside their 22. But typical teams, when you're inside your 22, all they want is the penalty just to kick for space and relieve pressure, right? So while some coaches might not like that because you're taking away momentum, or like the one instance in the game where players can take risks that are protected, that they have that safety valve that advantage allows. Typically, I don't play advantage within these scenarios, mostly because typically they usually don't lead anywhere. And then for effective advantage, it's long versus short, right? Do we play a short advantage on scrum advantages, and how long do you play an advantage on a penalty advantage? Typically, I tend to play slightly shorter advantages on scrums because I'm still in the sevens mindset, unless it's wet, and then I will play very long advantages on scrums because we don't want to scrum all day. And then for long advantages or penalty advantages, if you allow play to go on for too long, then you have the scenario where you're running from side to side. Penalty happens on the left-hand side of the pitch. Ball moves to the right-hand side of the pitch, and then you're like, oh, no advantage gained, and we have to run all the way back to the left-hand side for the penalty. So you kind of want to avoid those situations whenever possible.
Do you ever have a comment with either the scrum half or the captain before a game on, like, when I call an advantage, if you don't want the advantage, what they can do?
I typically don't, unless we're close to like halftime or close to in goal. I'll ask them, but typically most players don't really respond to when you're trying to talk to them. At least the attacking side. Oh, they'll hear the advantage that they have, but they're like, anything after that, for the most part, is just going to be white noise, right? So if you're going to address it, I would address it before the game, but
Usually
I
they'll talk to you about it.
yeah.
Usually if they're smart enough to know that, then they'll tell you before the game.
Yeah. Because otherwise, I'm just going to give them the advantage. If they don't want it, they know what to do to not have the advantage, right? So. Yep.
I was going to bounce this off of maybe you, or just anybody that wants to know. But I went to a presentation where Nigel Owen?
Yeah.
Yeah, where he was talking about just shortening the hell out of advantages.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering if we're still on that mindset.
For 7s or 15s?
15s.
I mean, so let's go back to the issue with trying to shape behaviors, okay? Early in the game, and the same thing still holds true. If our goal is to shape behavior, you're not going to shape behavior if you play long advantage. Until you get the desired behavior you want, you're not going to play any advantage. It's like punishing a kid 5 minutes after he takes a cookie. He's not going to get it. The punishment needs to occur right then and there. Make them impact penalties. That setting, and 20 years ago we called it setting the salt. It's still about shaping the behavior. And until you get that desired behavior, don't play long advantages. Teams are beginning to expect it, and they're recognizing it. So, and it's working because it will save you 3, 4, 5 penalties at the end of the game because you've tightened it up and you've allowed it to loosen up as players demonstrate the ability to maintain that behavior. But they're going to test you, and they test you each half.
Back in 2002, I don't know if this is what Mark was referring to, but Colin Hawk was at the conference on the game there, and he basically said that referees tend to play advantage too long in the hope that an advantage will happen. And what happens is you'll play 3, 4, 5, 6 phases, and by the time you blow the whistle, everybody forgot what the original penalty was for. Number one. Number two, you penalize the non-offending or the offending team twice because now they've had to play 5, 6, 7 phases of defense, and then they still get the penalty called against them. And then he ran through the options of most penalty teams. He said, look, most of the time a team's either going to kick for points, which they're going to have whatever their kicker's conversion rate is, or they're going to kick for touch, where they're going to win 90% of their line out, and 60% of tries are scored from first and second phase. So more often than not, blowing the whistle is advantage. And basically what he said, unless advantage is eminent, clear, and obvious, don't waste your time playing.
This is the reason why tackle and ruck penalties, there's hardly ever
I
going to get it.
understood this. I just thought we should say it out loud.
Okay.
Yes, we're still focusing on shaping behaviors.
Yeah. Always. The next section is general play and ending of the half. We're still continuing. The half ends does not end on a penalty kick. Typically, I'll ask them, remind them that time is off. They want the half to end or the game to end, to tap it and then kick it out, as opposed to just straight kicking out and being like, isn't the game over? And you're like, but this is the second year, so hopefully most teams understand that there is no ending on a penalty anymore. But you're still going to find the odd case that people don't know. And then for general play, we're talking about players in front of the kicker and players within 10. Don't really see a lot of players within 10 not retreating, but be aware of it and that they have to retreat even if they're within 10 and they're not advancing. You definitely have players, forwards specifically later on in the game, that are just like, I didn't advance, but you're within 10 meters of that landing zone of the ball, and they still have to retreat. Generally, I try to yell as loud as I can because a lot of the times they still don't listen, and even though I think I'm yelling, they can't hear me. Then another thing that's happened in the past couple of years since the last World Cup is what I call the Gilbert call, which is players playing the ball in front of a knock-on, being offsides. That's something I don't remember seeing a lot of previous to that call, and then once that call got put under a microscope, a lot more, at least I know that I'm a lot more cognizant of it, and that it's going to be one of those calls that we're more cognizant of. Yeah.
two elements to that. The player in front has to make an attempt to play it. They can't just arbitrarily hit them in the back or something like that. That's one. Number two, they have to disadvantage somebody else.
Yeah.
So in the instance where the fullback catches the ball and he knocks it on, and the winger from his team happens to be in front of him to pick it up, but there's nobody from the other
right
team
here.
for 30 yards.
They're
It's
17.
But if there's somebody there that was going to play that ball, he picked it up and took it from him, well, then yes, that's a penalty.
John.
So those are the two separate little elements that have to happen for the knock on to an offside play.
I would also consider the level of the game.
Yeah.
A lot of people catch the ball out of reflex.
Yeah.
And if it's a lower level, like the knock on, when you get to the higher levels, they should know what they're doing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Then the last thing is foul play. Too bad I can't show you my presentation because
We can demonstrate it.
no, I have the Owen Farrell's like chants meme where people have it like this and they have the hand of God, just like a third hand rapping. So general foul play, take your time with it. Time and space is your friend whenever you're dealing with foul play. The biggest thing is we want to make a big deal of it, right? I know I struggle when games get chippy or when players after the fact do the little scrumming fist in the neck, kind of pushing each other away, and getting players to settle down and letting me take care of it. I struggle in that scenario. So for me, the things that work are time and space, and then allowing players to calm down. And if you're gonna, especially when you're carding, right? Because that's going to make one team, especially if it's a foul play like high tackle or dump tackle that you're going to card, one team's going to be really riled up about it, right? That they, clotheslined or stiff-armed, whatever rugby or American football term you want to call, did that to one of our players. You want to make a big deal of it just to show that the attacking side or the teams that had it happen to, that you're taking it seriously. Because I had a fisticuffs game in Belgium where it looked like an imminent try was going to be scored. Ball was going to be swung out and scored, and I played advantage on it, and then I had to turn around, and then guys were punching each other in the face. So make a bigger deal of it.
Wait, so one thing I'm not sure about. So on offense, can offensive players straight arm to the face anymore?
So no. Caveat to that is if the hand's already out there, then yes, they can. Then
You can still
yes,
do this.
Can't punch.
You just
hand
go-
can't go out.
So it's the same as it was.
Well, no, high school, there's
Oh,
no,
yeah.
For high schools. no
high school,
contact.
there's absolutely none.
High school zero tolerance.
Zero tolerance.
So I had a women's game college earlier, and the straight arm went out into the chest and slapped up the neck. And the girl got hit in the throat and was all upset about it, but I played on because
Yeah.
it was a fairly, standard straight arm.
I would.
But,
I
all
would
good
do
with
the
that?
same thing as you did and just play on.
it just,
from that.
she got hit in the throat and she was upset, and the coach was upset, but it wasn't terrible. Yeah, tackle lower.
And then the next thing is, since for me the Gilbert call has come into prevalence, you might see a lot more Owen Farrells out there, little T-Rex arms. So be mindful of the arm of God. There. Thanks. Any questions?
Light applause.
He's not rapping. He's not just kind of arms.
What page?
Pages 9 through 15.
Chapter 3, verse 9 through 15. Let us pray.
Only the best game of the year.
We have a good.
Last 2 minutes, that's all you need to say.
Okay, so
Yeah.
9 through 15 covers scrum, line out, and maul. So I'd like to try to make this interactive to get everybody involved. So does anybody want to tell me what the most important thing is to have in scrum, the first scrum of the game? James.
First scrum of the game?
Yeah, what's the most important thing that we need to have as referees? What's the paramount thing that we're looking for?
Oh, there's so many. Set
players
the
listening
gap
to
and
you.
set the standard.
How about safety?
Okay, there we go. Safety. Setting the standard, that's also good, and square. Those are all three very important things. I think safety, they mentioned in the guidelines, is the most important factor. For all, especially the scrum, just because you have so much weight and you have so much pressure and you have so much at stake. You have necks that are in compromised positions, shoulders, legs. So safety is key. If you think anything's awry, you should blow it up and address the issue. So when we talk about addressing the issue that's happening in the front row, how should we do it? Anyone have an idea? If you have a scrum, your first scrum of the game is not set, it's not moving correctly, how do we deal with it?
You can low tones.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Who do we address? Who do we address?
Props.
Front rows.
Okay, front rows. Do we address the whole front row, or do we address a specific player?
Are you able to figure out who the individual is? What if you're not?
If you're not able to,
No.
good point. They do mention, and I have noticed this, that if you address a whole side and you mention an infringement, you're much less, you're gonna get a much less of a solid result after that talk than if you mention one player. If you're able to pinpoint it and you can see who's causing the problem and you can speak to that person directly, it's gonna be much better than saying, look, your side is collapsing the scrum, there's a problem. So I think pinpointing the issue and determining who is at fault and who can solve the problem, that's going to work better. What are,
comment on that?
go ahead.
So, because scrums are incredibly technical, don't be worried if you can't find the individual culprit, because even at the high levels like MLR, what they focus more on is what he's saying is the setup. So you don't have to be able to know exactly who it is. You can just say, look, this is the standard that I wish to see, and let them figure it out. So, yeah, so you don't have to address individual people as long as you have your standard that they'll adjust to it. They know how to, especially at the high level, even at like college stuff, they know. If you say, I need this straighter, I need this push, they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out.
So exactly, if there's an issue and you see that something's wrong, even if you can't pinpoint or target who it is, by saying, look, I noticed this at the last scrum. We had our first scrum, this is our second scrum, can we please try to correct it? It will likely lead to a better outcome in your second scrum. It will help you build rapport with the players, and you'll likely have an easier job. Because scrums can be something that makes the game really easy, or it can make your life a mess. If you have multiple resets and you have players who are working in the dark arts, it can be problematic.
Jordan, can you talk about what square? The guidelines describe the scrums have to be square. Okay. Can you talk about what that means and what it looks like?
Sure. So when you have your players lining up, and so they should be square with one another. So the bind should be so that the props are bound to their hooker in square lines. You should also look at where their head is. So if their heads are in the correct gap, you should also make sure that sometimes props will try to come in at an angle to put a large amount of pressure on their hookers to make it difficult for him to push the ball or to get some sort of an advantage whereby they can destabilize the opposing scrum by coming in at an angle. So there are a number of ways, but if you look at a scrum and you see that that there is a nine, you can draw a line through their ears. That's a straight line, then I think you'll likely have a good scrum. Am I missing something?
The defending loose head, what should his shoulder be doing? His inside shoulder.
His inside shoulder should be
showing.
Okay.
Meaning you don't want your defending. You don't want either loose head to have his shoulder hidden behind the hooker, because it reduces the gap. So to force a scrum to be square, one of the easiest ways to do it is, like you were saying, drawing the line through the heads, but ensuring that you can draw that same line through shoulders as well. And you should be able to see all six sets of shoulders. Thank you.
So another thing we need to think about is there are certain teams out there that will continue to push the line in terms of scrums until they see that we're penalizing them. So if you go to a first scrum and it's Cal versus UBC and the scrum doesn't look right. What the team will do is they'll likely look for an early push. And if you don't reprimand and call that early, they'll continue to threat the match. And that goes for a lot of high-level teams. They're looking for an advantage. So it does mention the guidelines. If you see something wrong, you can pinpoint it. You should penalize it immediately, address it immediately. Are there some other things that people notice in scrums that they'd like to add? Maybe problematic issues? Lee?
So another easy tactic
So this is
to
streaming
report
on a
is
YouTube channel right now.
the loose head.
So I
what
can't
they'll
shut
do
this
is they
down.
won't be in
Okay,
a
can I
position.
unplug it?
They'll
Yeah.
basically just lean on the opposite side head like a wet blanket. You would feel like a flat back. And that's a huge destabilizer for the deep further that is defending with that. So another big one too, if you're having issues with early pushes, is to address anyone in the front row and to say, I need you to be able to hold your weight. Because what that does is it makes it really obvious if they're not. Especially if you slow down the cadence and you make them hold their weight, you can automatically tell there's a problem. Because they won't be able to hold it if you hold the cadence for a long time. and
So
you're not pushing the
would you call a penalty kick immediately, or would you address that and try to manage it?
I would talk to them once about it, and then after that, it's a setup issue.
Okay. James?
Yeah, she mentioned cadence. I believe we talked about this in previous meetings. I've gone to the conclusion that a lot of teams will ask for a specific cadence, and I don't think we should be doing that. At each stage, wait for the scrum to settle down, and then go to the next stage. So you crouch, wait for the down to crouch. Bind, wait till the bind, reshuffled, and then you get the set. But don't give them a set cadence, they can time it, but wait for everything that needs to happen before you move on.
Right. So
It
there
may
are
take
things,
longer to settle down sometimes.
exactly. So there are 3 stages: the crouch,
The bind, yeah.
and then there's the bind. And that's exactly the right point. If they haven't complied with your first set, don't move to the next set. So your cadence likely will change. And another point they made in the game management guidelines is that if you have destabilized scrums and if you have had issues in the scrums, slowing down the cadence will likely lead to better stability. And I think Lee mentioned that. Bruce?
Well, if say they don't follow your cadence, that's a free kick first, and then a penalty if they don't do it second time is a penalty? Well, first time's a free kick?
If
They're gonna take early push.
so, for
I'm
example,
saying, but I'm saying, isn't that the same kind of a thing, and they don't follow your cadence and they either come in early or they don't?
I agree. Yeah.
So
Yes.
wouldn't that be a free kick first if they do it again, penalty?
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
That would be the right
consistent with everybody
I think that
else.
managing that team too, depending on what type of level game it is and whether or not you have experience front row, that'll help you determine whether or not this is something they're committing professionally or if it's something they're committing as a result of lack of knowledge. So be ready to help manage them in the event it's a lower level game too. I think that's something that helps throughout the match. Any other issues on scrums people want to bring up?
Don't fix it if it isn't broken. Don't break it if it's working fine.
Good point.
I just wanna note that the straight line, the scrum half has to throw the ball in, isn't intended to be a straight line towards the second row.
It should be
It should be a straight line into the tunnel.
It's already underneath the
right.
shoulder.
It should be.
Yeah, you already have your advantage.
So the way I look at I mean, we're looking at feeds, right? Is that
Yes.
okay? So I think that if it's egregious and you do not let the opposing team have the opportunity to go ahead and hook that ball, then it would be a feed. But there's a certain amount of leniency. If it's not in at 90 degrees and it's in at 87, are we gonna call that? Would you call that?
If it's going to the second row, I'm gonna call that.
Okay,
If it's
I
a
agree.
straight line into the tunnel, it's a straight line.
okay. But if that line is instead of at 90 degrees and it's at 78 degrees, would you let that go?
If the other hooker is unable to compete against it, I'm gonna call it.
Okay, well, I agree with you. I think that they've allowed us a certain amount of leniency in terms of how we determine a feed. But if the other team doesn't have the opportunity to definitely call it.
I think it's important the second time out that you move to the penalty kick, and the third time you move to the penalty kick and a yellow card. It's the second, third, fourth time that we're still doing free kicks
Sure.
that we need to tighten up.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. The scrums, we don't The fans aren't there to watch 3 scrums or 4 scrums in a row. The players aren't there to scrum 4 times in a row. That's why it's important to figure out what the issue is, correct it quickly so that we have fluidity and the ball moves out.
I'll literally tell them I'm not setting scrum again.
Right. And I think
Someone's gonna be penalized.
the game will move better that way too.
Usually you just say, this is gonna, don't say you're gonna penalize somebody, don't paint yourself into that corner, just say,
Oh,
this
just
is
say-
the last scrum here, guys.
Yeah, I just say that, it's.
I'm gonna figure
I'm not
something
gonna,
else
I'm
out.
not gonna set the scrum again.
But don't paint yourself in the corner where I'm gonna call a penalty, because then if you don't, then you're stuck.
So the next point is lineout. When we get to sacking and mauls, obstruction, it can get somewhat complicated, but in terms of formation, I think it's really important to let each player, okay, you have 2 teams running up to the line. Your offense is gonna throw the ball in. What I typically do is ask the offensive hooker how many players he's bringing to the line, and I ask the defending team to match it. It can speed things up. So if white has the ball, white hooker, how many players you bring line? 5. Okay, black's defending, black, 5 in. That way you'll know exactly how many people need to form the line. Is there anything else that people do that helps speed things up?
Ask them if they're gonna have the same numbers all day. Are you guys gonna go 5 all day? Yeah, okay, great. If there's gonna be any difference, you let me know. They'll be 5 all day. And that way you don't have to keep managing numbers. If it's, no, we're gonna switch it up, then you have to be very vigilant every time.
Exactly.
I wanna just, so make sure we're all clear on this and get official clarification. Teams rolling into a lineout, they walk up and try to go straight up. I believe they need to set the lineout, so there has to be a pause, so like a beat, before they can just go in. They can't just walk up and jump.
Correct.
Okay, so we're all, and the other thing that some teams, a couple teams are doing, and I know, and I, just saw, I just repped to it a couple weeks ago. They have what looks like 2 receivers, in which they have one guy come in late to the lineout, then he'll go in to be a jumper. So we need to manage that. He has to be in the lineout, or within a step or so before he starts doing what he needs to do. And because they'll have him the first time they had this guy was standing right next to the scrum half, and then he'd approach the lineout and enter and jump.
Need the VG.
Yeah, and
That's
that
2
might,
receivers.
that might be good for management, just saying.
Yeah, so
On the next line.
you've got 2 receivers
Oh,
who need to come into the line. So there'll be,
So this.
so I got you basically, once he's within a step of the line,
HDMI.
he's kind of like, he's.
I don't have an
that's the
HDMI,
outside
so
shoulder,
I-
but that's
gotta-
part of the line.
Yeah, is this
The
working?
receiver's back.
And if you give them the
Yeah, this
expectation,
work.
after
But
you've
you
done the
need
first line out,
you need
second needs to look like it
HDMI
does.
adapter. Let me see if I can find you.
Okay,
so if
You should be able to manage
No,
all
this
dead
is not
ball
working.
penalties.
the cord is
Say
not
that
working.
if the ball's not in
Oh.
play and the backs aren't back 10, guys, back 10. You step there. I need a
So
hooker
I
and a
need,
tram.
I either
need
need
one
an
receiver, you
adapter
gotta
that
step in.
splits
Anything
this
along those
to
lines,
this,
back, I need you back.
or I need another one of these.
Whatever it happens to be when the
A
ball's
VGA.
not in play, you need to manage out of every one of those penalties. Because if not, that's on you. That's on you for not getting people you want. Don't be that gotcha ref. Oh, they're back 9. I'm gonna wait. He threw it in. Great. I got a penalty over here. I'm gonna greet this guy. Don't do that.
That is a good
That
point.
just makes you not a nice person.
The players are there and you're able to talk to them, their ears are open, there's nothing distracting them. So as Pete said, we should be able to manage the amount of penalties. So what about sack mauls? What are we looking for in the event the ball comes into the line out, the team gets it, and what's the difference between a sack and a maul? What are we looking for?
Maul starts
But you're talking about a sack in the lineout.
Yeah, and it's a successful sack and a line out. What does it look like?
So a successful sack occurs immediately. So as soon as the jumper comes down, then the sack is initiated.
Good point. So once
Mindful of your timing on sacks.
Yeah.
Don't put it in the air, or let it coming down. Saw it in WPL, where Glendale were actually sucking the player in the air.
So exactly, if the ball's in the air, we can't mess with them.
Well, you can't mess with the jumper either. So the timing has to be accurate, whereas the sack does not initiate till after the ball carrier comes to ground safely. And so if the defending sacker is trying to grab the jumper while he's in the air, those little hairs on the back of your head should be standing up, saying be mindful of it. But there should not be any I mean, there's gonna be some contact because they're competing for the ball. But once that player comes down, he's gotta come to ground unabated by anybody else.
Right.
And then the sack can occur. The other piece that needs to occur is there needs to be separation between the players. So a sack is successful if you've got one person that is bringing the body down and nobody else is engaging.
So it can't be a maul. You can't take down a maul. So that's the key, is you have to in your head have a very clear idea if a maul has already formed or not.
Good point. And maybe announce it too, right? I mean, maul, once you announce maul, then you can't have a sack, right?
To be honest, in a lineout, you probably won't have time to call it a maul if they're trying to take them down immediately. That's more of something that you need to be ready for.
Okay.
Think about it the other way. If you have time to call maul, then the maul's been established, you can't sack
They
it.
know.
If it goes down before you can say maul, then they probably sacked it fast enough.
As a referee coach, I don't want to hear you shout maul.
Okay. You don't, and why is that?
It's white noise.
Okay. You don't think the players will listen or understand? Okay.
Players will know themselves if a maul's formed.
I'll disagree. Because especially
Less,
when you have,
less communication.
especially when you have a lot of people trying to, like, they got a tackle and they got people held up, they're trying to get their knee to the ground, and to create a tackle, you have to tell them when it's a maul. You do.
Because the maul will also establish the onside and offside line, right? And it'll allow players to join correctly.
But
So
for that specific situation, if you're being held up and there's no maul and your knee goes to the ground, that's a tackle, they must release. If there's a maul formed and the knee goes to the ground, the ball player must now have, the team, that ball must now get that ball out and moving. That's a very important distinction.
but I think Lee does make a good point. Also, what level are we managing?
And I think again, everything is about context.
Right. Yeah.
If I'm working with a high school kid, I want him to articulate the fact that it is a maul. If I'm working with a national panel referee or somebody of that nature, no, the communication is not there. So you have to recognize who your audience is. If you're doing a Division I game, you probably don't need to be articulating that it's a maul. Players know. If you're refereeing Division 1A, you don't need to be saying that it's a maul. If you're reffing a Division II side or an inexperienced college side, you might want to articulate that a maul's been formed.
Especially, I think what you're getting at, James, is like if also too, if it's not quite clear, right? Like if it's kind of a more ambiguous situation, like then you went down for a hot second or something, like, okay, maybe
So
some.
there are obvious mauls, white noise, definitely, but it's the statement, never.
But Lee brings up a good point. When we communicate, effective communication means the players will immediately understand who we're talking. If we talk too much, then they won't be able to understand effectively what we're trying to communicate. So that you do bring up a good point. How about joining? What are we looking for? A successful join to a maul.
Your feet under control from onside.
From the rear.
Okay, good. So can the offensive ball carrier in the maul slip to the back, or does the ball have to move back? This is a question I found that I didn't
He
know.
can slide anywhere through that maul he wants to.
Ball has to move.
No.
So it's the ball actually has to move.
The ball
And I
has to
didn't,
move back, not the ball carrier.
and I read this and I need to make a correction too, because I've had mauls where the ball carrier will slip back, and unfortunately that
It's offside.
is, yeah, that's a penalizable offense. The ball has to move back through players' hands. Yep.
My understanding, once I'm in the maul with, let's just say without the ball, I can slide through that maul anywhere I want as long as I stay bound on people.
Yeah, this is the ball
And if
carrier.
This is the ball carrier.
I don't remember a specific
Law.
law that identified because I have the ball with me, I can't slide around as long
Well,
as I
if
stay
you're
bound.
bound.
That law changed last
That
year.
was clarified a couple years ago, because that was a technique teams would use. They get the ball and everyone would kind of swarm around them. They kind of like, kind of basically step around the ball carrier and let them
Okay,
swivel
no,
back.
if that's a new law, I missed it, I'm sorry.
Let's just clarification.
Another one online, do you mind for the long arm transfer?
Long arm transfer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Be mindful of those, they are happening.
Which is?
And they're happening more and more.
Which is?
As the player comes up, the ball comes down before they hit the ground, they're passing the ball off.
Oh. So they're moving it back before they
hit the ground.
Yeah.
Long arm transfer.
And at that point, the ball's out.
Right, because he wasn't bound.
So is there anything we need to look for with that long arm transfer to successfully manage it?
No bind.
You just look at a lot of it comes down to the timing, but you just need to see the player hit the ground before they move the ball backwards. if it's not, if they're coming down and the pass the ball and the ball going backwards, then you've got the long on transfer and you penalise it because the player's offside.
Just one more thing on the line out sack maul. A sack is a tackle. So you must allow the tackle to happen if it's going to happen. So you can't, a lot of times defenders, but the lifters will come up and they'll kind of bring them down and kind of put their body in the tackle. So make sure that the ball carrier is able to tackle.
It's another good point that James brings up. When a team comes to the ground and is looking to form a maul.
Can we have one voice, please?
Too many side conversations, guys.
So James brings up a good point. When we have a ball carrier come out, the jumper comes down, and he has two pillars come to support him to start them all. What are we looking for from those two people to his side for successful formation? They cannot obstruct the ball.
It can't be in front of the ball carrier.
They can't.
To tackle.
Exactly. They have to allow the defense an opportunity to get to that ball. So that's another good point. Okay, I mean, that pretty much sums it up, so I'm all set unless anybody else has any other points they'd like clarification on. Okay, good.
What was Santiago doing?
I was trying to find my notes on that.
He's probably driving around frustrated, can't find a place.
Yeah, I called him to get an answer, so I don't know if he's gonna put on or what.
So Roberto's 4 through 8, 20 and 21.
4 through 8.
My email.
Do you want me to do that too?
I can do it.
Okay.
I can do it too.
So at the breakdown, the tackle, okay? The biggest issue that we need to see is a release from the tackle. So we'll look at it from two different perspectives, the tackler and the tackler assist, okay? Tackler, by law, is defined as a defender who goes to ground with the ball carrier. In any game, there can only be, in any and every tackle, there can only really be one tackler, and that's the person who's gone to ground, okay? Before he can contest for possession, he's got to get to his feet and come through the gate, okay? So he's got to come from his own side, all right? Or he rolls away, but he can't obstruct. So we need to see tackler immediately get to his feet or a tackler roll away, but he has to be an active participant once he's on the ground. All right. He has to come through the gate, and he has to, so make sure that you're seeing those tacklers come through the gates. All right. There has to be a complete release. Now we're seeing good athletes that are spinning around and they're not quite getting up. There has to be a clear space. We're not asking for the butterfly that was called. We're not asking for that. We're not asking the players to see it. But you've got to see a clear release. The only way you're going to be able to see that is if you're there to see it. Okay. What are the other obligations for a tackler?
Safety of the ball carrier going to ground.
What's that?
Safety of the ball carrier going to ground.
Okay. You can hit them as hard as they want. Okay, so we're essentially looking at chest line down as those legal tackles. All right. One of the big issues that we're seeing is the seatbelt tackle. Okay, and that's the one where it comes over the shoulder. Dangerous tackle immediately. Get it out of the game. Okay, high school level particularly don't want to see it. Okay. So when you start seeing that arm coming over the shoulder and what looks like a seatbelt, and you'll usually see it from behind, okay? Penalize it immediately. Don't play any, particularly early in the game, don't play any advantage with it. Get it out of the way. Make it one of those big impact penalties. All right? Tackler assist. Again, tackler assist has to come through the gate. They have to see a clear release as well. All right? One of the trends that we're seeing, if you have a lot of penalties for ball carrier not releasing, that's a big indicator to coaches and to performance reviewers that you're not getting the tackle right. Okay. particularly at high competition games, you shouldn't. If you're getting more than 3 ball carrier not releasing, you're getting tackle wrong because you're not seeing the release at tackle or the tackler assist. All right. So as trends, that's one of the big indicators that I see, and I know that other coaches are seeing as well. That if you've got 3-4 penalties with a ball carrier not releasing the ball, you're usually screwing up tackle and tackler assist.
On that, and again, coming out from WPL, is in the WPL, we've made a decision not to reward the tackler, the ball carrier not releasing, if that tackle is still in the tackle zone.
Mm-hmm. So the tackler has to meet his obligations before you're allowing the poach.
Before you reward them, you have to meet it.
Correct.
If you don't, why reward them?
Right. And so in a lot of, it's a sequence, it's a chain of events. The first thing that needs to happen is that tackler needs to get away. If he doesn't get away, nothing else occurs. The tackler must get away actively. A lot of times you'll see a tackler getting away, and what Lee's saying is you're getting a tackler if he's not rolling away, but a poacher comes through legally and tries to get his hands on it. You shouldn't be rewarding that play. Okay? The tackler didn't meet his obligations. And as clarification, I would suggest that you tell you were fine poaching. It was the tackler not rolling away that caused it.
You wouldn't have got the poach if he'd have rolled away. He's going to place the ball.
Correct. Now remember, there is such a thing as a one-person ruck, which is the offensive person standing over that space. Okay, at that point, there's a ruck. They've got to contest for it. They can't go for the ball. The defenders, in order for allow that poach to happen, those hands have to come over, grasp the ball before the one person is over the ruck. Other questions?
My normal rule of thumb for poach is if you're going to get it, if you're going to get over, I need 2 hands on the ball before contact with the shoulder. Because if you have 2 hands on the ball, that's possession. You don't if there's contact first and then you reach down and play it, you are the hands on the right. If you get 1 hand on it and you pull and you don't get it, you try. But 2 hands is possession, 1 hand is home. That's kind of always like that.
How about if the guy comes over, starts the poach, loses his balance, and goes over on all fours, and then recollects the ball when he comes back up?
He's not losing balance. What I'm seeing a lot now, and it's actually starting to piss me off, is these guys are going over, they're putting their hands on the ground, they're waiting for contact, and then as soon as contact happens, then they go for the ball, and it's either I'm getting the ball or I'm getting the penalty. They figure that there's no way they can lose. I'm either going to get this guy penalized for not releasing, or I'm coming away with the ball. The reality is, as soon as those hands hit the ground, bang, off your people. You got to nail them. And I've seen it time and time and time again, and it's really starting to bug me.
So what would you do with a player who goes in for the poach, but instead of effectively trying to remove that ball from the ground, they're pulling it into the tackle player to try to draw the penalty?
It's game
Okay.
I think that's
Thanks for your help.
Leave everything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Guy was on the ground. I watched him do it. He grabbed the ball and put it right into the guy's belly. He goes, "Ah." I went, "Yep, gotcha." He goes, "No, it's penalty to me." I said, "No, it's not. It's the yellow card. You get to go. You do it again, I'm giving you a red." I was very harsh about that. These manufactured penalties against the spirit of the game.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you see a lot, especially in the sevens, where guy gets tackled, is on the face, and the coach comes and puts his hand around the body and the ball. So he's got everything at once, and he's pulling against them. Yeah. That still gets rewarded quite a lot.
I just laugh at him and go, sorry, I don't know word laziness. And then they figure it
So
out.
with regards to the tackler and tackler assist, you'll notice all arriving players must enter the tackle zone through their gate. No part of a player's body, including the arms, may enter the tackle through any other area. Again, 2-3 years ago, you used to see players coming through the gate with their hands still on it, on the ground and rotating around it. That doesn't work. Their body has to come through the gate. Other questions on tackler and tackler assist?
Do you always, before the game, do you always talk to both teams, say that's?
No.
No, is that not anymore?
Less is more before.
Less is more.
You talk to the team.
There's only, the law book tells you what you're supposed to say at pregame. Okay? You talk about scrum engagement and you check boots. That's really it.
Okay.
You shouldn't,
At a lower, what about lower level, like?
and again,
Third division.
context,
They always want to know the balls out.
context is everything. Okay, don't offer don't offer. If they're asking, fine, let them, but don't sit there and spend 5-10 minutes on your pregame.
They're just looking at your outfit, checking to see if you're confident, deciding if you're fit or not, and seeing if they can cheat against you. That's all they're doing. I mean, you give them the basics. Look, guys, crouch, bind, set. Crouch when I say crouch, bind when I say bind, wait for me to say set. Scrum out, left, straight in the middle. Yeah, penalties in front of me, ball out of your hands. It's out when it's uncovered or played. One hand or two, I don't care. It's got to be moving. That's it. See it.
You pretty much should be no more than about 2 or 3 minutes.
No, and I would suggest I'd suggest if that early in the season, put a timer on yourself. Okay? If it takes you more than 1.5 minutes to talk to a team, you're talking too long. Really, all you need to do, the only thing that's required in law, you check the boots, you have your front row discussion and conversation, that's it. So, in terms of context to tackle, you want clear space between on either side of that ball. Okay, plain and simple. You want clear space on the defending side. So at a tackle, you've got clear space on the ball carrier side, and you've got clear space on the defending side. If you've got that, you've got a good tackle. It's clean. Okay. The problem is those bodies in the ground. You have to be able to see it. All right. Players need to have places to put their feet because they can't put them on the body anymore. So make sure that space is clear. All right. Don't put hands on the other side of the ball. We're seeing a lot of teams that are trying to gain that territory by putting their hands on that ground first and bear crawling through that tackle zone. Get it out of there. Penalize it early. It's off their feet. They're taking away that space legally or illegally. Excuse me.
And I'll tell them, look, you have rights to the ball. As soon as your hands hit the ground, you're out of the game. Got to be on your feet.
Yeah, and so it's creeping back into the play where you're getting hands on the ball and waiting for the defenders to clear you out or the support play to clear you out and taking that space. They're not there. They're not in that space legally. Yes.
So for arriving players, when are we going to call ceiling?
What do you mean?
So if an offensive player is over the ball, how do we go about that? And we know that their, let's say, shoulders in contact with the player on the ground, their body angles at a lower angle. Do we wait until the offensive player challenges that ruck before we call ceiling, or do we let them? Do we penalize without even the other team having an opportunity?
Again, who's arriving first, defense or offense?
Offense. So they've established the ruck.
So
offensive players.
So if the offensive player is got his feet over the body, 1 foot over, okay, 1 foot over, 1 foot behind the ball, we're good, right? And in that context, if he's grabbing a hold of that tackling player, as long as he's got his weight on his feet, we're good.
But his shoulders still have to be above his hips.
The shoulders still have to be above the hips. Yeah.
With his description, I know what he's talking about. Guy goes down and plays the ball, lays it back, arriving player comes right up and basically puts your shoulder on the guy on the ground and seals over.
Yeah. But his shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my point is, I go, like, I got to see daylight. I need you up, and like you said, no shoulders above hips. If that's the case, then you'll get space in through there, so that they can.
So to effectively manage that, we call a penalty if that happens, or we only call a penalty if there's a challenge at that ruck.
It depends on the game.
Work through it first.
Yeah, we're at the
Establish the behavior first.
But the thing is,
the guy seals it, the ball comes out, and nobody ever had a chance to contest it. Then you let it go because it wasn't material. You go, hey guys, last tackle, that guy sealed over, can't have that anymore, okay? No more of that. And you see it like the scrum the book. 18 guys, so whatever, all talking around.
Paul's doing your section, he's not
and you
doing
let him know. If it was the guy seals over and the guy comes in to contest, and it's the first tackle, sealing, you got to call.
But if
somebody's
somebody seals the ball like that, the defense isn't even going to try to challenge it because they know they can't.
And if you remember my first comment, if it goes in, it comes out quickly before the defense even has a chance to challenge it. then not material, play on, talk about it at the next stoppage. If it's prevented a player from fair contest, you gotta do something about it.
The hardest part from a coaching perspective, from a team coaching perspective, the hardest part that coaches are having right now is teaching defenders when they should challenge for possession and when they can't. Okay, and really it's reading what's in front of you. And from a defensive-minded position, if offense has got the feet over there, most teams now are not going. They're teaching their players not to even contest for that. Get out, put your gate guards or your posts on either side of the tackle and defend that A gap quickly, and defend the next tackle and the next sequence. What ends up happening is at the lower competitions, defenders try to fly in on everything, and they just wear themselves out. So, but again, you have to, as a referee, you have to manage that. Make sure that they're on their feet. Other questions on that? Alligator rolls. Okay, alligator rolls when the defense, you'll see alligator rolls from the offense when the defense has got their hands on the ball and they can't clear them out, so they're rolling them out. The alligator roll, the grasp has to be on the waist. It cannot have head in contact, so they can't go for the head. It's immediate penalty.
What if they're pulling players out by the
Can't
shirt?
pull. You got to push.
So
Pulling
penalty.
is illegal in all
Pulling is illegal in every aspect of the game.
Right. Would you say penalty or card?
Penalty. I wouldn't call it a card. Just tell them, penalize it. But
The game of push.
you gotta push. You can't pull.
Okay. That's common.
Yeah.
I've had that a lot of games.
Especially defensive, I'm trying to pull this offensive guy over his.
Right.
It's a good way to put it.
And the ruck has already been established. If that offense is already there, then the ruck has already been established. Right. Other questions on?
Yes, the gator roll is legal in high school.
Yeah. As long as it's not on the head.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Depends on the competition.
I mean, I'll be honest, there's
Competitions
6 high school teams in Northern California that could be.
There are some competitions that don't allow it. And I believe North Cal still does, but there are some.
Easily. I'm not
Don't
saying
allow
like I'm Stanford, I'm saying there are some really good high school rugby here. Yeah. I mean, Danville's as good as anybody. And when St. Mary's goes down and puts, 38 or 35 on back to nothing, when college teams are thumping PRP teams, don't be fooled by youth.
So, Article 7, that's what you were talking about in that body position.
Yeah, that one there, the bottom
Yeah,
one is
that's what you don't want.
about. And what I'm saying is that if it's something that you can manage because it's not a material infraction, then you try and manage it. Guys, that last one, that's no good. I got to get daylight. You can't seal on that. I can't have a shoulder on that guy. I need space. Whatever, however you want to describe it. If it is material, if he does prevent a player, you have to call it. You have to blow something. And John asked the question. Guy goes off his feet at the tackle. Is he just done? And I go, well, if he makes himself not material, then no. I mean, if you quickly, oops, I'm out of here. And you see the guy that goes over it, you're like, no. And he rolls like this, and the ball's still there, and the scrum half can still play it. Then don't hit him for it. I mean, he's trying to do the right thing, and he hasn't disadvantaged the opposition. I mean, it always cuts back to, does it change possession? Does it materially affect the quality of possession? And that's kind of the basis of all of this.
So I always love this diagram, and as a coach, I always show it. You're assisting the roll away. So the red player is assisting the blue player getting out of there quickly. Allow it. Okay?
Positive rugby.
It's positive rugby. The ball's available. And it's so long as somebody comes over and caps it so that there's a body over the ruck, we're good. And you notice that on this position, you could argue that both these players are off, all 3 players are off their feet, but the ball is available. Okay, and again, he's assisted that.
That ball's available when they bridge too.
But illegally.
Small piece around this. You see it every once in a while. Guy goes to ground, he puts the ball back, takes his hand off of it, and then for whatever reason, he's compelled to want to touch it again. Normally it's because somebody's about to poach it. They'll reach out and push it again, or they'll put their hand back on it. Or once you let go of it, you're done. You're off your feet. You don't play that ball again until you get back to your feet. So be conscious of that.
Which one was the other one that he was doing?
It was 20 through 21. But I have one quick question about
Yeah.
ruck. Ball comes out and then moves back into the ruck. Is that ball out or in?
Once it's out, it's out.
So
You can never pull, once the ball is out, it can't be brought back in.
You can't reform a ruck by the ruck moving on top of the ball.
So essentially, the ball is out and it's still trapped in the middle of the ruck because it's already been out once. So how do we manage that?
Well, how does it go out? How does it come, like, if it comes out and then someone kicks it,
It
rolls
moves
back
out, yeah,
in?
it moves out, it kicks off the scrum half's foot, and then he shoots it right back into the ruck.
You know,
And then it's
let
a
him
mess.
hit, you know.
I kicked it into a teammate in front of him, accidental offside.
Just yell ball out.
Clean it up.
I've had that happen, and they ask, is it out or in? I say, it's out, but they don't have access
Just
to it.
tell, play it,
It's
people,
becoming unplayable.
At the,
I mean,
so
figure
at the
out-
higher levels, the players Jordan, at the higher levels, the player on the ground, he's met his obligations by placing the ball away from the tackle. There's nothing that says that he can't maintain possession of that. It's positive rugby. So the ball carrier has gone into tackle and he's presented it away. We want that ball carrier to present that ball away from his body so it makes clear available ball. Okay. What we don't want to see is arms extended. He feels the pressure, brings the ball back into his chest, and then goes out. That's, he's not met his obligations. So he gets his arms out there. He extends a nice long body ruck, long body presentation, and keeps his hand on the ball. Allow him to keep the hand on the ball. Okay, because forwards are going to come over and try to kick it. Well, that's what's going to happen is that they're going to kick it and it goes back into the ruck. So allow that. Now remember, defenders are going to try to get their feet through the ruck. Can they kick the ball out of a ruck?
Yeah.
Can they hook the ball out of a ruck?
Absolutely, sir.
yes.
Yes. So allow that. But you have to penalize it if he's kicking it through the ruck.
So hooking is allowed.
Hooking is allowed, kicking is not.
Yes. And the basic gist of the not
Same in
releasing
a scrum.
penalty, in the simpler sense, is it's preventing a player and their feet from fair contest to the ball. You don't have to necessarily be holding it in your arms.
Would
How
you
many
say
times
20?
have you seen a guy have a ball under his leg and he's holding everything he's got to hold that ball down? But ref, I'm not holding it. I'm not holding it. Yeah, I know, but your leg is keeping that guy from getting it. Or they'll roll on top of it, or you get that extra roll so the player and his feet can't get to it. It's all just preventing the player and their feet from fair contest.
Teams are taught to roll the ball 2 or 3 times.
Well, again, if there's no defender there, I don't care. They can roll the length of the field. But if there's a defender there, you better stop. The presence of a defender changes the ball carrier's rights.
What was the other one that he was doing?
It was 20 and 21.
What is 21?
So that's 18, 19.
There's 18, 19.
So it should be that open play, ball out, and
Okay. So everybody asks, when is the ball out of the ruck? Okay. Hands on and emerging. Simple.
Yeah, moving it. Doesn't have to have hands on it. Gotta go shooting out of the bottom of it.
Oh, if it's beyond the ruck, it's out.
Right. So scrum halves, if they have to dig, okay, allow them to use their feet, dig the ball out. But hands on and emerging is when it's out. When can a maul ever turn into a ruck?
Yes.
no.
Why not?
You have a maul, and then you can have the maul.
Ball gets put on the ground.
Balls over, balls out, or the
Ball gets put on the ground.
Ball carrier's got his back to the opposition's goal line, so he's facing his own, drops the ball. Dropped it backward, it's not a knock on, the ball's now on the ground, the player's on their feet over the ball. That's ruck. Maul never ended, but then the ruck began as soon as the ball. The difference between a ruck and a maul.
Ball is out, no, the ball's out of the maul. No, that's not a ruck. The ball's out.
It's still.
What's the definition of a ruck?
Well, a ruck is We just define it.
One person.
When you have one person over the ball.
No, that's after a tackle. If you
Ruck
have the
balls
ball
are
on the ground
down,
with two or more players engaged, or player from either side engaged over the ball. That's
Because this is what a lot of coaches ask. We had a ruck, or we had a maul, and now we have a ruck. I don't think
So no.
If I'm the ball carrier and we're trying to drive forward and it's gonna launch it, I can put it on the ground and we keep going, that's a run. Ball's on the ground.
So your
No, that's
question,
not-
we're asking the question correctly, but the reality is what coaches are talking about is it's a collapsed maul that somebody's refereeing as a ruck and not as a collapsed maul, and you get that long to get it out.
The ball has got to, if the ball carrier goes to ground, okay, that ball has got to be available immediately. And if it's not immediately available, it's a turnover.
so. Effectively, a maul, the ball is played immediately after the maul ends, or the ball is ruled unplayable, and so there's never a ruck after a maul.
Well, if everyone stays
A
on
maul
their
is
feet,
ended, or a maul is unplayable.
if everyone stays on their feet, it becomes a run.
A maul can become a ruck, but it's such a unique circumstantial.
Yeah.
Never see it.
You're not gonna see it very often.
It's not a tactic. It's an oops. It just happens.
So,
Like Dave said,
and again, if that ball is not immediately available, then it becomes a turnover ball.
But it's mostly a collapsed maul that most refs are going, oh, now it's a ruck. And I'm like, no, it's not a ruck. It's a collapsed maul, and you're okay to do something with it, but the ball has to be immediate. And if not, then it's a turnover because it wasn't immediately played.
Exactly. The bodies are on the ground, it's collapsed.
And there's too many instances where referees are providing it and that ball is not available. Okay, so
They really, it's like, use it. And then
Be
they're not
very
using
leery
by
of
the
it.
time you're done with it, you're going on the whistle.
let's see. Any other questions?
Not on this.
Penalty tries.
I think we should call
Do
Don't
you?
bother the game.
So is there a kick after a penalty?
No.
Try.
No,
anymore.
Thank you.
after a penalty,
Yes,
Penalty
after a
try.
penalty try.
a penalty try, no.
But there's a penalty.
It's 7 points.
But it's automatic yellow.
No, for foul play. But
But
almost all.
if you're having a penalty
But almost
try,
all
you have to
penalty
have,
tries are
you have to
foul
have a
play.
penalty for a penalty try.
Almost all.
Why would you have a penalty try that didn't have a penalty?
Because you can't tell who collapsed the ball.
Guys a meter from his own goal line, and he's holding on for dear life as 3 defenders are trying to take the ball off of him. And if he releases, it's an automatic score. So that's a penalty try. Is that foul play for the guy holding onto the ball on the ground? He didn't punch anybody. It wasn't a dangerous tackle.
The only times I have seen it
Professional
where
foul.
a penalty try has been awarded and a card's not given is if you have like a drop small and you don't know exactly who did it, or thinking in like a scrum that's gone down, you don't always know. Those are the rare circumstances. Probably will not be hard when you get a penalty try.
You don't just go to the captain and say, pick someone.
No.
You actually pick the captain.
Now,
No, really, you
I
actually
that
can't
was
pick
like,
the
he
captain.
got the ball and he's like a meter from his goal line. And all these guys were right
Now,
there, and he freaked out with
Read
the ball.
penalty try. A penalty try should be accompanied by either a severe admonishment, a yellow card, or a red card. You got 3 choices. Okay, you don't have to give a card, but you give a card or you give a severe admonishment. Okay, if you're awarding that penalty try. Substitutions, real quick. When can a substituted player come back onto the field?
Front row.
Front row.
when the player was injured due to foul play.
And if a player was injured due to foul play. So not a lot of teams are aware of it. So let's say number 15 gets hurt. Let's say number 15 goes out 30 minutes into the game. Okay? He goes out and number 14 gets injured as a result of foul play. Can 15 come back onto the field?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So he can only come on as a result of foul play. All right. And you, as a referee, have to be the one that says it's foul play. So if a coach wants to bring number 15 back on, the only way he's going to come back on is one, if he's front row qualified, or two, if there's foul play that's occurred, and to replace that player. Questions on that?
Can you please review the front row qualifications for bringing a front row back on?
The front row, okay, so when can a front row player return?
There's no other front row players.
Replacing
So he can replace, so a front row player goes off, number one goes off. When can number one come back on?
When there's no other front row players.
If there's no other qualified players, and you either have an injury,
Do I
or a
have-
yellow card, and there's a scrum.
Do I have to play my other players before I bring number one back on?
Other qualified players? Yes.
No.
No?
I don't have to go through all of my players before I bring number one back on.
That actually happened at ITTs in Glendale one year. I was repping, I repped earlier, and then the next came up, and the South had 2/3 of the Eagle front row at the time, and they were up by 14 points, and they pulled those guys off. They then promptly gave up 14 points for a tie game, and I'm like, why don't you put your front row back in? You know, these are the Eagle guys. Those guys are getting crushed. Well, like, we substituted them out. I'm like, well, they can go back on if the other front row's injured. And they're like, we had no idea. I'm like, you know, the guys quickly started getting their stuff back on as fast as they could. And I'm like, this is the ITTs. These are Eagle players. And they didn't know they could do this.
What's the difference between substitution and replacement?
Substitution is tactical, replacement is injury.
Can a replacement player come back on?
No.
No, may not come back on. And so the rule of thumb, if
he was already deemed as injured,
if you've got a front row player that's going off, you need to ask a question, and that question should be: is it tactical or is it an injury? If they say it's an injury, he cannot come back on, regardless of what it is. Okay. If it's tactical, great. But you as a referee need to know if it's tactical, if it's a substitution or replacement. Substitution can come back on, replacement cannot.
All right. Head injury assessment, our wonderful favorite thing in the world to talk about.
We don't have one.
We don't have one in the U.S. Now, can a team play short while that player is being assessed by his coach and training staff?
No.
If we don't have an assessment.
There's no such thing as assessment. And I will give you, I'm going to be very.
They can't play short.
They can play short. But if you suspect, here's the issue. If you suspect that somebody has got it as head injury, that player needs to be gone. Plain and simple. And I would suggest as a referee that if you start looking at a player and using your finger to track to see if that player is injured,
Time to take them off.
it's time to take them off. You are putting yourself into so much liability by doing that. Because at that point, you suspect that he's injured or that he has a head injury. We cannot be playing doctor. You're not qualified, and even the doctors won't do it. There's no such thing as HIA in any competition that we will be officiating. So if you suspect, you must remove, plain and simple.
Just look for symptoms, guys. I mean, bleeding, dizzy, glazy eyes, that sort of stuff. It's some obvious stuff. If you see it, you have to be aware. You have to do something about it. I mean, I had an instance where and again, this is why I bring this up. The kid's sitting there and he's got his hand on his head, and the guy next to him says, "You need to tell the ref." I go, "You need to tell the ref what?" He goes, "I think I need a head injury assessment." And I'm going, okay, we don't have those. So if you think you need one, then you're done and you're gone for the day. Or if you want to play short, and you can talk to your coach and your trainer, and you can decide whether you really need a head injury assessment or not. That's up to you, but you're not going to get a sub on. You're just playing short. And you could be over there just like you would tying your shoes or getting a contact or getting a cramp rubbed out or anything else. But if somebody else comes on the field for you, then you're off. You're done. You ain't coming back.
Vicky.
Not all head injuries present right away. So the standard is more if you suspect that there is a potential for a head injury, then you take off. Not you see symptoms, you saw a hit and you suspect it could have caused it.
Exactly. I mean, you have to see what caused it. In this instance, I had no idea what this kid was involved in. Didn't see him tackle anybody. Didn't know what he was talking about. Had no idea what was going on. The flip side of that is just because a guy gets bumped and he cuts his eye open doesn't mean he's concussed. He just has a cut. So you have to be able to tell the difference between a facial laceration and an actual head injury.
And one of the things that I learned in this weekend when I was in a concussion presentation is you can not be hit in the head. You can be hit, a hard hit to the body.
Yeah, and then your head hits
And
the
the-
ground, whiplash.
Nothing with the head hitting anything.
Yeah.
It's the brain
It's the brain moving around
inside.
inside the fluid, yeah.
So it might not be a
Whiplash.
head hit. It's just a really strong body hit.
It's a whiplash effect.
No, it's
Whiplash is
not
muscular.
related to a whiplash effect of the head moving. The head is not moving. The brain moves
Inside.
in the head
Inside the fluid.
because of a hard hit to the body. So don't think it's only a head hit.
So question, if a team does have a physician and they know that something's wrong with the player and their physician on staff looks at the player and allows them to come back on the field, what do we do?
Physician
No.
doesn't allow.
No,
If they've been
No.
evaluated, we say you cannot come back on that field.
if you suspect, you remove. Plain
They
and
can never-
simple.
They can't play.
They cannot play.
Okay.
Do not put yourself in that position. I don't care if they have a doctor. I don't care if they have 10 doctors. The league won't care. USA Rugby won't care. Okay, your insurance goes out the wall. If you suspect,
Additionally, they're not allowed back in until they've gone through, a medical doctor has released them for return to play and the entire return to play protocol has been exercised. So they're not gonna be on the field again for at least 2 weeks.
but we don't have the policies and procedures in place.
We don't.
Now, Rugby NorCal does. The youth does. If a player has gone out, they have specific protocols that they go in place with transition back into play, and it's a minimum 2-week window. NCRFU, I don't believe has that in place yet because they don't have the monitoring system in place yet.
So the system's not in place, but USA Rugby has said this is the protocol.
Yeah.
Which means if you ref him the next week and the same guy's there, you know he was taken out for potential head injury. You probably need to not let him play because if something happens to him in that same game, it's gonna come up. Oh, you saw him last week and now you let him play this week.
Other questions? Okay.
I have a question on a prior topic.
What?
Just on that front row thing. You're saying that if number one subs out,
Tactical.
tactical,
Mhm.
and then the replacement or the other prop gets injured without foul play,
Mhm.
that the number one can come back.
Yes.
Okay.
So
No other props.
And he doesn't.
No,
no.
Yeah, you said that.
You don't have to go through all of your other players before number one comes back on.
But it didn't require foul play for that injury.
No.
So if
So
the coach wants that guy back on, all he's gotta do is tell this guy to go grab his arm.
Pretty much, yeah.
Mhm.
That was what I was referring to those guys.
Hurt my ankle.
And the Welsh.
Tell the guy's back hurts or something.
Now, the player coming back on is not a front, it will apply to front rows, but it applies to all players. So any player that's been substituted can come back on to play as a result of an injury because of foul play.
Yes.
Okay.
That I was clear on.
Right.
But
And that applies to a front row as well. So let's say number one goes off. Number 21 comes on. Number 21 gets injured as a result of foul play. Number one can still come back on.
I got that, but
22 or 23 doesn't have to go on.
Yeah.
But if there's no foul play, number one can still come back.
Correct, because it's front row qualified.
So this is just unenforceable. I mean,
Well, front row's a protected class, that's a little different thing. What you don't want to see happen is have number one come back on and play hooker.
21 goes off because of the claimed injury, he's not gonna be able to come back at all.
Because now
One
he's
thing
in.
gets
Yeah, you can't just keep rotating.
Yeah.
No, I got it can't happen 6 times, but still, it just seems like that's real tactical.
What you don't want to see have happen, and what I was about to get to this, you see these guys moving around, is the guy comes in to I'm going in to play hooker, and I was previously on at one,